After Star Wars was released, it became apparent that my story, however many films it took to tell, was only one of thousands that could be told about the characters who inhabited its galaxy. But these were not the stories that I was destined to tell. Instead, they would spring from the imagination of other writers, inspired by the glimpse of a galaxy that Star Wars provided. Today, it is an amazing, if unexpected, legacy of Star Wars that so many gifted writers are contributing new stories to that saga. George Lucas from the introduction of A Splinters of the Mind's Eye, 1996.
There's a line in the Phantom Menace, quite almost forgettable. Queen Amidala stands in the Senate chamber. Her planet is under siege, and she says, I was not elected to watch my people suffer and die while you discuss this invasion in a committee. It's a good line. It's a bit theatrical, but it's accurate, and it's more revealing than she knows. Because what we're going to talk about today, what James Luceno's Cloak of Deception shows us, is that the invasion wasn't the beginning. The committee was already there, and it wasn't just Naboo suffering, it was the whole galaxy. Welcome back to the Skywalker Files from a certain point of view, the podcast where we crack open the novels that built a galaxy far, far away, one obscure gem at a time. I'm your host, Rockwell, and today we're stepping away from the bounty hunters and secret prisons and diving straight into something far more dangerous, galactic politics. Yes, really. Because if you want to understand how 1,000 generations of pieces fell apart, how the Jedi lost their way, and how one man, Darth Sidious, bent the entire Republic to his will without firing a single shot, well, then you have to start here. Cloak of Deception was published in June of 2001. It's a time when the prequel trilogy was still young and uncertain. Us fans were still trying to make sense of what exactly had happened in the Phantom Menace. Why was the Trade Federation allowed to have battle droids? Why was the Senate so useless? And how, in a galaxy with Jedi Knights in hyperspace lanes, did everything go so horribly wrong? Well, Del Rey handed those questions to James Luceno, and Luceno did what Luceno always does. He connected the dots. Luceno is an architect, not a dramatist. His stories aren't about the crash. They're about the creaking beams, the missing bolts, the slow decay that made collapse inevitable. If Matthew Stover writes poetry and Michael Reeves writes pulp noir, then Luceno writes engineering reports, and he makes them sting. Timeline wise, this novel takes place about a year before the Phantom Menace, and decades after the High Republic has faded into myth. The Clone Wars are still a decade away. Darth Maul is still in the shadows, and Chancellor Valorum is still clinging barely to power. This isn't the story of how the Sith took over. This is the story of how no one stopped them. So let's talk about who's in play. At the center of the novel is Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. And if you're only experienced to Qui-Gon, is the episode 1 novelization, or Liam Neeson's haunted stoicism in the movie, then Cloak of Deception gives you more. He's not quite the rogue you see in the film, not yet, but he's already drifting. He trusts the living force. He listens to his instincts. And what he's starting to feel is rot. Then Obi-Wan Kenobi, his apprentice, is here too. He's sharp, observant, but he's still bound by the rules. He doesn't argue much, but you can tell he's learning more from what Qui-Gon doesn't say. At its core, this novel is about Chancellor Finis Valorum, and perhaps the most tragic figure. In The Phantom Menace, he's a footnote. Here, he's a man trying to hold the Republic together with good intentions and very little leverage. He's outmaneuvered at every turn. But he sees the danger. He knows something's wrong. And then you have Senator Palpatine. Elegant, unassuming, and it seems always one step behind the crisis. Publicly, at least. He doesn't do much in this novel. He doesn't have to. He let the system collapse on its own, smiling politely as it happens. We also get a rogues gallery of supporting characters who offer a glimpse into the galaxy's tangled machinery. You have Havoc, who's a radical leading terrorist, striking out against the Trade Federation. Dangerous and ideological. You have Arwen Cole, a mercenary who's become a personal quest for Qui-Gon, and working for Havoc to bring about his terrorist goals. And then, on another note, you have Wilf Tarkin, a planetary deputy governor, quietly taking notes on how democracy dies. There's a whole host of corporate dignitaries, Nemoidian schemers, and corrupt senators, each more interested in profits than principles. Yoda's here, Mace Windu, and the whole Jedi Council, but they feel distant, detached. They're concerned, yes, but they don't feel anything's urgent. That, more than anything, is the point. Cloak of Deception is a conflict not fought with blasters, but with policy. The Trade Federation, yes, those bureaucratic Nemoidians, will soon see blockading Naboo, is under siege. Their shipping convoys are being attacked across the galaxy by a radical group called the Nebula Front. These aren't simple pirate raids. These are deliberate, coordinated strikes designed to provoke response and undermine the Republic's authority. The Federation naturally wants more protection. Specifically, they want to arm the freighters with droid starfighters and defense systems, giving them the ability to protect their own interests without having to rely on the Republic's increasing sluggish support. But there's a complication. They're not technically allowed to do that, not without Senate approval. Enter Chancellor Finis Valorum. Valorum is a man caught between two collapsing walls. On one side, the Republic's corporate sector is demanding protection. On the other, the Outer Rim systems, those being taxed and exploited by those same corporations, are on the verge of open revolt. If Valorum gives the Trade Federation what it wants, he risks legitimizing private militias. If he refuses, he invites further instability. His solution is a compromise. He proposes legislation that would allow the Trade Federation to militarize its freighters legally, but only if a tax is imposed on the Outer Rim shipping routes. to balance the scales. It's a win for the core worlds, but a loss for the frontier. And a move designed to keep the Federation under Republic oversight, at least in theory. Meanwhile, the Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi are drawn into the investigation of the Nebula Front. What begins as a series of seemingly disconnected attacks slowly reveals a deeper strategy. Someone is manipulating both sides. The Nebula Front may claim to be anti corporate, idealist, but their actions are too precise, too convenient. They're being used, played like sabacc, by someone far more dangerous. In the background, the galaxy's key players converge on Aradu for a trade summit after an attempt on Chancellor Valorum's life. But nothing is truly resolved. Jedi uncover only fragments of a conspiracy, and the rest of the Trade Federation bureaucracy is assassinated, leaving the Nemoidians the sole proprietors of the Trade Federation. And they get what they want: legal authorization for their battle droids. Meanwhile, Palpatine, well, he gets everything. Because the tax, however unpopular, sets a precedent. The Federation's militarization, while legal, begins to cascade. The Jedi leave Aradu with more questions than answers, and Valorum, though still Chancellor, emerges politically crippled. His authority is hollow. His legacy is already fading. No war has begun yet, but the rules have changed. The ones that had prevented it once have been rewritten. Cloak of Deception is unlike most Star Wars novels. There are lightsabers, yes, but they're not the focus. There are battles, but they're quiet, fought with diplomacy, manipulation, and press releases. The book operates at a low frequency. You feel the tension more than you see it. It's a political thriller dressed in Jedi robes, a story of how the system wrought, not from the outside attack, but from within. The mood is clinical, almost sterile at times, and that's deliberate. Luceno wants you to see the decay not as a tragedy, but as an inevitability. This is what happens when a good men get tired and ambitious men get patient. There's also a layer of dread, not in the horror sense, but in the slow, inescapable kind. You know where this is going. The Trade Federation will blockade Naboo. The Senate will stall. The Jedi will fail. And Palpatine will win. The knowledge sits like a weight over every chapter. No matter how hard Qui-Gon pushes, no matter how sharp Obi-Wan becomes, they are not in control. They are players on someone else's board. At first glance, Cloak of Deception appears to be a novel about political negotiations and bureaucratic friction. But beneath the slow-moving surface is something more unsettling. A portrait of a galactic government not in crisis, but in decay. The central theme of this novel is erosion, not explosive conflict, but the gradual wearing down of a system that once held the Republic together. It's not that evil rises with banners and armies. It's that good intentions begin to rot when no one notices, or worse, when everyone does and no one acts. And that's the novel's most chilling message. The system doesn't need to be overthrown. It only needs to be guided to fail. This complacency feeds into another key theme: The illusion of control. Everyone in Cloak of Deception thinks they're playing the game. Valorum believes he's saving the Republic. The Trade Federation thinks they're securing their future. The Nebula Front imagines themselves the revolutionaries. Even the Jedi think they're bringing balance. But the truth is, none of them are setting the rules. They're simply following the script they can't see. One that was written by a man in the shadows who never raises his voice, never reveals his name, and never makes a move until it's already too late to stop him. And finally, there's the theme of invisibility. Not literal, force-powered stealth, but the way Palpatine and the Sith move through the system undetected. Cloak of Deception reminds us that evil doesn't always enter with a lightsaber. Sometimes it wears a senatorial robe, signs the right paperwork, and votes in favor of peacekeeping measures that lead directly to war. The most frightening part? No one stops it. Because technically, everything is legal. There's a certain irony to Cloak of Deception. It's a book about crises, conspiracies, and creeping authoritism. And yet, nothing explodes. No one is unmasked, and the war doesn't start. The Jedi don't fall. Not yet. And that's the brilliance of it. This isn't a story that ends in fire. It ends in silence. A quiet vote. A narrow victory. A diplomatic summit that accomplishes nothing. And by the time it's over, the pieces are in place. The trap is set. And no one even notices. What James Luceno achieves here is subtle, and maybe even a little subversive for a Star Wars novel. He gives us a galaxy on the brink, but he doesn't push it over. He just shows us the slope. We come to understand that the Clone Wars weren't caused by a single act of villainy, but by 100 tiny legal decisions. That the Jedi didn't fall because of one fatal mistake, but because they slowly forgot how to see the dark side when it wasn't holding a lightsaber. That the Republic didn't collapse from weakness, but from exhaustion. And through it all, we never quite catch Palpatine in the act. We just see the shadow he casts. In the terms of style, Cloak of Deception isn't flashy. It's not interested in thrilling set pieces or a galactic scale spectacle. It's interested in the why. It rewards the patient, the cautious, the kind of reader who sees a throwaway line in the Phantom Menace, a mention of a trade dispute, of taxation of outlying systems, and thinks, wait, what happened there? This is the answer. It's also the sobering reminder that most galactic disasters don't begin with a declaration of war. They begin with a vote. In the grand timeline of Star Wars publishing, Cloak of Deception occupies a strange, almost liminal space. It arrived in 2001, 2 years after The Phantom Menace, and a full year before Attack of the Clones. It served as a kind of bridge, a correction, a grounding wire. At the time, there was a lot of noise around the prequels. Fans were debating tone, dialogue, midi-chlorians. What George Lucas had given us was bold, but not always clear. Enter James Luceno, the trusted craftsman of the expanded universe, whose job was not to rewrite the story, but to explain it. Cloak of Deception doesn't just expand the galaxy, it clarified it. It gives context to what felt like abstraction in The Phantom Menace. It doesn't apologize for the political focus of the film, it leans into it, it enriches it, and it makes it matter. Cloak of Deception showed that Star Wars could do something other tie in franchises rarely dared: political thrillers. It said, yes, this galaxy is full of aliens and starfighters, but also tariffs and senatorial procedures. And those things matter. And the fans? Well, some were surprised, some were bored, but many, especially those who stuck with the EU, came to see this book as the one that tied it all together. It gave weight to the bureaucracy. It made the Trade Federation terrifying. Not because of what it was, but because of what it was allowed to become. And quietly, in the background, it did what Star Wars always does best. It told us the story of a fall. So far, we've seen the shadows deepen. We've watched the Republic lean into the curve of its own collapse. We've seen the Jedi blink and Palpatine smile, and no one quite realize what it means. But next time, the quiet ends, because while the Senate debates and the Jedi Council deliberates, someone else is already moving in the dark. A weapon without politics, a creature bred for one thing only: silence and death. Next time, we'll be descending into the underworld of Coruscant with Darth Maul, Shadowhunter, a novel that trades backroom maneuvering for back alley murders. One desperate slicer, one relentless Sith, one race against time. If Cloak of Deception was the calm before the storm, Shadowhunter is the lightning strike. I'm Rockwell, and this has been the Skywalker Files from a certain point of view. Until next time, may the Force be with you, even if it's not always on your side. There's a line in The Phantom Menace, quite almost forgettable. Queen Amidala stands in the Senate chamber. Her planet is under siege, and she says, I was not elected to watch my people suffer and die while you discuss this invasion in a committee. It's a good line. It's a bit theatrical, but it's accurate, and it's more revealing than she knows. Because what we're going to talk about today, what James Luceno's Cloak of Deception shows us, is that the invasion wasn't the beginning. The committee was already there, and it wasn't just Naboo suffering, it was the whole galaxy. Welcome back to the Skywalker Files from a certain point of view, the podcast where we crack open the novels that built a galaxy far, far away, one obscure gem at a time. I'm your host, Rockwell, and today we're stepping away from the bounty hunters and secret prisons and diving straight into something far more dangerous: galactic politics. Yes, really. Because if you want to understand how 1,000 generations of pieces fell apart, how the Jedi lost their way, and how one man, Darth Sidious, bent the entire Republic to his will without firing a single shot, well, then you have to start here.